Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's webinar from LanguageNut. Just want to draw your attention to a couple of things. You'll notice in the bottom right hand corner there is a QR code. That is a link to a questionnaire that we're just doing for us to see basically what languages people actually do teach that are on our sessions. Also looking at how many students you've got in your current year 11 cohort going through to GCSE, and how many students how many of your students have opted for languages, whether they be opting in year 8 or year 9. It's always nice to see what the difference is in terms of how many percentages of students are doing a language, and also a couple of questions on what scenario you're faced with at the moment, whether you've got a class full of students doing languages that are not doing languages next year, or whether you've got a mixed class, or whether you haven't got any students at all. And also it gives us an idea, the last question of the 6 that are there, what kind of things that you feel you're facing which might be more challenging for you going forward into September, so that when we are putting our webinars together for next term, which we're just at the point of doing at the moment, we can address any issues. And in actual fact, if anybody wishes to speak at our webinars, please get in touch with us via the normal website or via the email addresses that are on the last slide. So looking at the first slide tonight, we've got, you will get a copy of this slide, which Brian, who's working behind the scenes today, will send out after this session. There's 4 links there to some ideas that Emma and I, who is also speaking with us tonight, you may want to use with some of your students in year 10 or in year 9 to just get them prepared for any assessments that you've still got to do this academic year, or maybe just to do a bit of revision. And there was also a little bit earlier in the year, and our final webinar, we thought this one was our final webinar, but we ran our ALL first event last week in Brighton at Sussex University. It was very well attended, and we had speakers from AQA and Pearson talking about the new accredited French GCSE, and Helen Myers was also there outlining the differences between the 3 specifications. And I was due to talk, but at the end we ran out of time, as I thought we might, so we're going to put on the session next on the 4th of July, which I was going to run last week. We're going to do it as an online webinar, and we've entitled it "It Ain't What You Do, It's the Way That You Do It," basically balancing the legacy GCSE with the new GCSE. So if you want to sign up for that, we'll include the link with this PowerPoint after the session. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to start. Obviously tonight, you know myself and you know Emma. Emma's done a few of our webinars in the last 12 months, and obviously me with all my experience that I've got. Just to kind of flag up that I always do, it's really important that you follow any guidelines within your own institution. If you're waiting for an inspection, or whether you have a trust-wide approach to things, then obviously anything that we share tonight is very well tried and tested by both Emma and I, and people that we know or people that we have seen working in the classroom using ideas. But obviously you don't want to put yourself in a vulnerable position or your institution, so always be mindful of the policies that you have within your own school or your own college. And it's always really good to look at this presentation alongside the video, because some things do actually get more explained within the video. So tonight, as always, we'll touch on the teacher standards just very briefly, because I know that we've got a lot of ECTs, second year teachers, RQTs, a lot of School Direct, Teach First, PGCE, SKIT trainees that join our sessions, or even watch them afterwards. And it's always useful to see where the links are there if you wish to use any of this towards your teacher's portfolio. We're going to have a quick, we're going to have a look at films and music and projects. We're going to have a look at doing a theme per week and a lesson and what that might do. And then we're going to look at some Webquests and authentic materials. And as always, Emma and I have split it between us so that we don't end up losing our voices. You know, speaking for a full hour is can sometimes be a bit boring to listen to the same person, so it's nice to have 2 people speaking. Again, I've put the QR code there just in case you were late to joining us. It's just a quick 6 question survey to give us a little bit of information about your current situation with your languages, what the state is of your e-back entries and the percentage of students that have opted this year, and also if there are any other issues that you feel you're facing that we can look at. And I'm hoping that Brian will sort of monitor the chat for us behind the scenes today. If there are any questions, pop them into the chat and Brian will ask them at the end. And he's also monitoring the survey for us. So very quickly, we look at the teacher standards. I won't go through them, but you can see there that obviously if you're faced with a Key Stage 3 class, some students might be, doing languages next year, some might not be. You might have a mixed class, all sorts of different scenarios, which we'll touch on in a minute with the next slide. But these are where I know from experience that this training will fit. So again, if you wanted that unpacking a bit more than welcome to email me, and I can flesh that out a little bit more if it is what you would want. Okay, so what might you be facing? Well, the current Year 8 is the new Year 8 that's going through the new GCSE, which will be done in 2026. So some schools still do a 3-year Key Stage 4, and they do their options in Year 8, so you might have that scenario. Or you might be the traditional way of doing options in Year 9, so your Year 9 that are coming into Year 10 will not be affected by the GCSE, obviously. By the new GCSE, they'll be on the legacy, but certainly Year 8 will. You may also find yourself starting a new GCSE early. So, for example, a school might have collapsed the timetable because they feel that they can do that after the exams have taken place, because it's really important to try and get a head start with. Some schools feel that doing that does help. So that might be the situation where you start teaching your GCSEs already. It could be that you're teaching Year 8 GCSE and obviously they've done their options and they've started, which is very early, but I know some schools where that does happen. You might be faced with a class that are not doing languages at all, and I've had that scenario, as I know Emma has. You might have a mixed class of some continuing and some not continuing, and again, that's probably going to be, if you're keeping your classes in situ until September, until the end of the academic year, that's probably going to be a very common scenario that you're facing. And again, both of us have got experience of teaching, of looking at all these scenarios and dealing with them over our time in the classroom. You might have done 2 languages, so one might have chosen, say, Spanish, but they're still carrying on with French because that's your school's policy that they do 2 languages. And there are some schools where they do 3 languages. In fact, there is one student I know in my vicinity in Leeds whose school does that, and he's chosen 3 languages for GCSE. He's the first triple linguist that school has ever had at GCSE, so that's an exciting statistic for them. And then again, we're all faced with this, some being forced to do a language for e-back numbers because the school's been, that's what it wants to do. And that can be the toughest scenario to face if you've got students who don't want to do a language but are being forced to do it. And so building whatever you decide to do into your scheme of work is something which you can do it, but every year I guarantee it will be different. So it's always a tricky time this time of year. You can say, well, we're going to do that topic, we're definitely doing that, but you'll always find, or well, I found in my 33 years in the classroom, that every year has been different because I've been faced with some sort of scenario or another. One thing I've always done is I've always managed to, if a student's carrying on with it until the end of Year 8 or Year 9, to the end of their time of not doing a language anymore, I've always certificated that at the end. So in the very last assembly, before they've either changed to a new timetable or gone into a new year, so at the end of the year, I've always given them a certificate to say what they've actually done of Year 7, Year 8, Year 9, and I've always put on the back what they've covered. And I've always made a big deal of that with having it presented in with the head there, or with the vice principal, or whoever's important. Your line manager you might have a member of senior management team who looks over languages, who has responsibility for that, but it's always been somebody who has had a bit of clout. And in some cases we've done it in school assemblies. It might have taken a bit longer, but we've just made it a big thing, because that way the students know that they're going to get something out of it, so they can move on with that into their futures, like that they've got that proof that they've not just done 2 or 3 years of language, they've actually got it written down what they've done, and it's been signed. I've certainly done it on a trust level as well, so we've had somebody from high up in the trust to come along and do the presentations or to sign the actual certificate, and I've put a little bit of money aside to make those certificates look really nice. So I think this is the final slide for this survey. If you've not yet done it, please be aware it's anonymous, so none of your names will appear on it. It's just looking at some statistics and just some ideas for any future preach training that we run. So I have done a separate session on films, which if you go onto our website on our platform, you'll be able to see. So I've dipped in and out a little bit with the films tonight, because films do actually are quite motivating, but it's a case of which films. These films on here that you can see are all films that we've actually been involved with or taught or had bits and pieces of. There are loads more, but these are the main ones when Emma and I sat down to discuss and to actually plan this session a couple of weeks ago. So what I do, I always watch it first. So I spend an evening just having a look at it. I might have seen it anyway. It might be something that I watch regularly, or it's something I've done lots of times. And obviously, I look out for the subtitles, because the swearing can be translated differently if there is any of that. And I've always made sure that the rating is lower than the youngest students, so we don't get any comeback with any parents or anybody in your senior leadership team. I've kind of, even if I've been showing a film that's had a few scenes in it that have been a bit dodgy or whatever, not dodgy, but a little bit sort of something that you might not feel is suitable for that lesson, for that class, I've just thought, oh my goodness, the internet's gone down when they've been watching it, and I've done it that way. You might feel that's too uncomfortable for you, and that's absolutely fine, but that, from my experience, is what I've done. Obviously, if there's anything in it that's contentious with contents, I've avoided that. But you will know your students, and you will know if there's anything in there that might upset any of them. So therefore, you will avoid that. Okay. And I've always thought about, what is my purpose for this? Am I doing it culturally? Am I doing it for language? Or am I doing it for motivation? And often at this time of year, it's mainly been for motivation, I'll be honest with you. Unless I've got a class who are fairly still switched on and they're still happy to do stuff, in which case, dangling that little reward of that certificate or whatever and making it a big thing. You could even put on a little bit of a lunch for them, or a breakfast or something, just to make that really important end of year event, that they're going to get something out of it, and just make it a little bit special, like for them. It just helps with motivation. And again, I've usually thought, do I need the subtitles in English? Sometimes we've watched it in English and we put the subtitles on in the target language, or vice versa, and that's always been quite nice to do. It's important to know that whatever you do at this time of year will benefit any child. So even if you're doing some of it in English, if your policy is to speak as much target language as possible, I would think that you'd find that a lot of the target language in English will be fine at this time of year. That's what I've always found. So what I've done is I've taught the types of films with clips. So I've had a PowerPoint with, the Toy Story on. So j'aime les films pour les enfants, or j'aime les films historiques, or ich mag die I don't know, ich mag die Nachrichten, or anything in Spanish that Emma will come out with probably later on. My Spanish is not that great, but it's not as good as Emma's. Emma's is brilliant. And so what I've done is taught those, done lots of activities with mini whiteboards with them, and then I might have done a little game like this, where I've come up where we could do with knots and crosses, or it could just be a game where they've had counters and things, just to get them into the habit, into the frame of mind of doing a simple opinion. And then I've gone on to watch the film, or that has given me an idea then about what kind of genre the students might want to watch. Once I've chosen my film, I might get some stills from it. So I just make some screenshots, or just take some photographs, put them in an order, and I might just have them on the screen, or I might just print them out around the room if you've got enough money in your photocopying bill, and the students have had to put them in the correct order. Or I might have done a worksheet with them, and then I might have some simple vocab or sentences to match. You can see in the bottom right there, I've covered up part of Il a des jours tes yeux. I've covered that up, and I've said to the kids, right, what do we think is underneath that picture, underneath that black square? And we've done a bit of a discussion in English, and then we've put it into the target language. Or I might have given a multiple choice as to what could come there. I might have done, I might get half a dozen of those and put those on a sheet and give them a little bit of a multiple choice as to what might come under that, in terms of what might be there. And then again, some students might draw a picture about the film, and you can drop it into PhotoSpeak, which is an app or a website. You can go onto the website and you can animate the voices. We've probably seen that. The two children at the bottom, I've had them like, what are they waving at? Or maybe just to drop them into a picture with a back screen that's blank, what could be behind that? And I've even got some students who, you know, a bit fidgety, they might have cut out some of the characters, put them onto a big A5 sheet, A3 sheet, sorry, or even onto big sugar paper, and they've annotated it with some bubbles and things like that, just made a story out of it themselves, or even just dropped them into a fictitious background which they've actually drawn. Because you find that a lot of students will quite like to draw and things like that, and you can mix and match that with different bits of language as you go through, labeling some in English, labeling some in the target language, because bear in mind you are teaching literacy as well here with English, and they are going on to do English as one of their core subjects. So then thinking about predictions from the film or the posters, we've maybe watched some of the trailers, maybe had some posters for the film, and maybe to predict what vocab they might need to talk about the film or what might come up in the film. Maybe look at some of the character names and pronounce them using phonics. Encanto leads itself very nicely to a family tree, a fictitious one. Or I might have got hold of some transcripts or some summaries that I've found. And again, I can put you some links that, and I know Emma and I have been talking about putting together a webinar pack tonight just to send it out after this session, and be able to just send that in one pack all zipped up so that everybody can get the resources that we're talking about, rather than people just emailing us and going, have you got this, have you got that? We're still happy for you to do that, but it makes it slicker for us and slicker for you as well. You don't have to keep saying, oh, I'd quite like that, or I'd quite like that, or I don't want that, but I'd like that. So you can pick and choose what you would like to take out of that. And as always, we're always happy to you know, to share what we do, and because I think that's how the language teachers are great, what language teachers are great at. So when I was writing the A-level material last year for the literature and the films, I managed to get hold of a lot of all the transcripts for all of our films and that were on the French and Spanish website, and obviously that we use on our platform. And obviously, you know, if you wanted to watch one of those, it might be suitable, it might not. I've got all the transcripts for those if you do want to look at that, and that, you know, that they're free to find. It's just finding them, and it's having the time to do that, which is obviously something I had last year. So again, once you've got the summary or you've got the transcript, you can do a tangled translation of a couple of minutes of the film. You're not talking about the whole thing. You're just honing in on a couple of minutes if that's what you wanted to do. Maybe the most interesting, or maybe something that you feel is going to be something that you want to do. It could be a little bit of cultural thing that you're going to move on to do, or it could be just something that you feel your students might be interested in. Using vocabulary and phrases from the film as a bingo. And then I've got some film packs, and I know Emma has, which we'll put together in the pack when we send it out in the next couple of days. And again, you will be able to see the type of things that we've done. Again, what I've also done is, obviously at the moment we've got the photo cards that are very much visual stimuli, and those of you that have seen the new specifications will know that AQA has 2 visual stimuli and PS have got the 1. Educast is still to be accredited, so that's still very much up for discussion. But you can use the stills for physical or personal description, and for the students to be able to make some language out of that. They could act out the scenes, they could read aloud from anything that you have in front of you. You might use the film to get them to listen to the dialogue and write it down. That's a really good example of a dictation that you could do. So you could read a part of the dialogue, or you can get your students to listen to it and write it out just from a minute from the film. And again, once they've done that, they could read it aloud again, or you could give them the transcript from a little bit of the film to read aloud. It's just good practice for those students who are moving on to the new GCSE. Lots of film reviews and summaries, and again I've done that both in English and I've done it in French, in the target language. I've had maybe some students who are maybe not going to carry on to do languages. They've done a summary of beautifully written out, or they've done it on Word and they've cut and pasted it, and then around that they've put some keywords that they would hear in the film or they would associate with the film, and that then you can see that you're still keeping that language going. But for the students who are not doing a language, they feel happier and more engaged if they can do the summary in English. Whereas the students who are carrying on, if you've got a class of mixed students, of some who are not and some who aren't, they might do their summary or film review in the target language. Some songs, particularly the animated ones, might have some films might have particularly the animated ones, sorry, might have songs with them, in which case you could use those as well. And then obviously something I've always done is I've tried to watch the film, but then I've, rather than all of them working on the whole film, I've split it up, and I've kind of done a bidding one, said which bit do you want to look at, which bit do you want to look at, and then the students have kind of done a bit of a deep dive into that section, something that is really interesting for them. And again, there's lots of different activities that you can do with that. So here are some examples, what we have used for French, for Spanish, and for German. Okay, and again, I've then put onto, I think I'll just jump the link there. On this link here, I'll go back to that other slide, but here are some of the links where you can get a lot of the movies for free. If you are if you're a Germanist, you can get a lot of them from the Goethe Institute in London, and obviously that's really quite a good thing to do. But again, you'll be able to follow these links from there. So what might you do? These are some of the things that I've done. I've looked at all sorts of different things. They're just there as a little bit of an idea, and you might find that some of those might be useful for you. The bottom 4 of here, I think, are on YouTube. When I was first teaching, going back, it shows my age now, but there were lots of programs that BBC used to do. One was called 15 Minutes, another one was called Top, and then the other one was called oh, it's dreadful when you can't remember what it is. It's gone out of my head, but if you follow it there, you'll be able to find them. And oh, it was oh, it's where the 2 singers were singing. Anyway, what I've done is I've put the links here for the last 4. Emma and I were looking, and we found some of the links to some of the 15 Minute ones, and I know Emma will probably mention one about the Spanish one. You can just go into there and you can find songs, you can find the programs, they've all been archived, and it's quite good. Hallo aus Berlin is the German one I was thinking, and the songs on there are really catchy. Okay, so for the music, we've just had the Eurovision Song Contest. Lots of schools do the Eurovision Song Contest. I know that. There is a really good karaoke with Alexi Bexi, and I think we mentioned that in a previous webinar. One of my colleagues, Zoe, mentioned that. And then Sarah, who is here on the top right, she does. That's a line from one of Adele's songs. She does English songs in French, and they're always great to listen to, all the popular ones. You can use them as gap fills, spot the intruder. I won't read the whole of that, but there's lots of things there that you can use. And then I do loads of singing in my teaching, even now when I go in, and I still do some teaching now. You know, it's really something that I find helps with students doing all sorts of different things, and getting them to sort of have a bit of a competition between each half of the class is really good. Disappearing text and lip syncing and all of that. So that's all on there for you to just read through at your own pace. So projects, something that we did a few years ago in a school I was working at, that those people who are primary, if there's anybody on here for primary, will have joined us for Ellie Chettle-Cully's session a couple of weeks ago. And she teaches in a school in Leicester, and they look at artists' work. So they look at different artists in the school. They might have some artwork that's been done by the students or whatever, or just pick an artist, and then the students have created their own, and they've written about it, and then they've done a gallery walk in the middle of the class. We used to do that quite a lot, where we'd put the work in the thing in the middle of the tables, and the students would walk around and they would have a look at stuff, and they would give points for things. Might be something you could do a bit of cross-curricular with your art department if you get on with them. Making board games and a fashion show, again, probably you've heard before. And these 3 board games are not mine, I must admit. They came from someone whose name I cannot remember, but they were shared on Twitter just after the lockdown, and they've been used quite a lot, I know, within the MFL community. Okay, if you're going to do a project, I've tried projects many times, and I've always come a cropper with them until the last sort of 10 years of my teaching. I've always set the scene as to what we're going to do. I've always set the deadlines and what the overall purpose is. I've always thought about that. What do I want to get out of this? Is it that I'm just keeping the kids busy? Or is it that I'm teaching them a skill? I'm teaching them research skills. And that involves baby steps. And drip feeding your phrases and your practice before you produce it as something I've done. Again, I can send you my PowerPoint on how to do that based on very different topics. Some of the topics that I've done all sorts of things. So this one was a particular topic I did on a country. So I said to the students, choose a land in Germany. I said, choose one of the Länder in Germany. So Bayern, for example, is Bavaria, or Baden-Württemberg, or anywhere really, and Nordrhein-Pfalz, and look at all of this to see if there's anything there that you can find out. So we've had quite a research lesson. The list is endless. However, it's really difficult for students at year 8, year 9. It's really difficult for year 12 and 13 to do research unless you teach it properly. So it has to be taught. So you've got to teach those skills at the beginning, and that is worth doing if you feel that's something you want to do. And again, I can send you my resources for that if that's something that you feel you might want to do next year. It may well be too late this year to do, to drip feed the research skills. But I worked in a school where we did that from day one, and it worked beautifully with the school. Okay, now sometimes I've done this because I've had a class and I thought that's not going to work. So I've done a one lesson of it. So I've gone to myself and I thought, right, these students might never go to Spain, but you know what? We're going to have Spain in our classroom. So I've taught them the survival language, and it links itself to the Pearson transactional language, which is what they're having in their role plays going forward. They've got 10 scenarios that are going to be in the Pearson new GCSE, which AQA are not. AQA are keeping their role plays based upon personal relationships and all of the social things. So I've looked at these, and these are the ones that I've often done, and they dovetail nicely into the into Pearson if that's the spec that you do. If not, they're still useful. And if you're a subscriber of LanguageNet or not, excuse me, we have lots of different, in our vocab trainer, we have all these areas here. So you can see I've just done some screenshots here. You can go eating out in the 3 different languages. So it might be worth having a look to get a trial with LanguageNet to see if you're not a subscriber, to see what's on our website, on our resources. And then, of course, I've always thought about a mini project at the end. I've gone with a mini outcome, and those of you that have attended our webinars will have seen this. I've linked something to it. So it could be that I'm doing a week, and at the end of the week, I might 4 lessons. We'll do a balloon with the words on it or something like that, or an end product, or a 500-word competition, which is what I've done. Sometimes I've said to the students, right, the end of this term, we're going to have 500 words. I want you to tell me in 500 words, I don't care if they're keywords, isolated words, I want you to write me down as many 500 words as you can without using any dictionaries or anything. And we might have done that as a little bit of a fun, a bit like a sponsored silence, and they've done it under like test conditions, and they've really enjoyed that, actually, doing that. I put an example from a lesson here. You can see here I've done some schemes of work where we've done about new products. We've prepared a presentation. We've done how to do a good sales pitch, and then we've made an advert, and then they've prepared to launch their product. Or we've done something where they've booked a hotel over the phone and they've had to choose the hotel and they've gone in to do that. Or we've done something where they've done a house and they've had to basically carry out research on French accommodation and do planning and research. Anything new that they've done, designed a sales leaflet for a property of their own in France. So again, those are just some examples of some of the things that I've done in the past. Right, that's me time. My turn to be quiet. Well, Emma carries on. Emma, I'm going to pass over to you to finish off with the Webquests and the other bits and pieces that I know are coming.
Thank you, Elaine. Good afternoon, everyone. Obviously, some absolutely fantastic ideas and suggestions from Elaine, especially for longer projects to keep you going, maybe till the end of term. When I was putting my ideas together today, what I was particularly thinking about was a really challenging year 9 class that I had a few years ago. It was about a 50-50 split for those who were going on to do GCSE and those who were not. And we had one lesson a fortnight. Obviously, we have more than lessons. So there was one period 5 lesson on a Friday that came around once every fortnight, and it was really, really challenging. So what I was doing is thinking of some ideas that I used with those lessons, making sure that for all the students that are carrying on with the language, you are preparing them for their qualifications, for their GCSE, keeping them going with that language, but also engaging the ones that aren't going to continue with it. So that's hopefully some ideas for some single lessons, or maybe they could use over a couple of lessons with classes like that. So one absolutely fantastic way to engage your students is to use authentic materials. That is a huge, a really broad range of things that you can use. But one thing that works really well is Webquests. So if you can book an ICT suite for a lesson, or maybe you're lucky to have devices in the classroom, or maybe students are able to use their phones at school, you can do a Webquest for students. They find it really engaging because they're using kind of their detective skills to find out answers. It's not just about the language, that's obviously there, but they're using some of their other skills as well. So they find it really engaging. There's a real focus on transactional vocab. Elaine mentioned that earlier on. So if you're doing the Pearson specification in the future, that's something that will be useful for those students if you've got students doing this in year 8. But also if you know, for the current role plays, for the current exams, transactional vocab can pop up, so that's useful as well. It's also really helpful for numeracy. So, oh, that's it. Sorry, thank you. Really good for numeracy. You can get students to work out prices. They can be looking at the timetables. So again, you're embedding another skill which they are going to need in the future. You could have this lead to a project with an output. This one, for example, is from KS3. So you could get students to design an aspect of a theme park. They could design their whole theme park, just a restaurant, just one ride, anything like that. So if you want to have an output there, you can. One thing I would say is obviously if you are using devices, you need to be monitoring that students don't switch the website to English. So you have to make sure that they go onto the .fr or the .es website, and just keep an eye that they're not swapping the language around. But students generally find this really engaging, and I found that they like the challenge of finding the answers themselves rather than just switching to English. You can also pre-teach some vocab. You don't have to. You can let students just kind of go for it. But if you want to give them some hints, maybe a support sheet for some of your students, just, you know, for different things. This is where you're going to find information about tickets. This is where you're going to find information about timetables. Just, you can kind of vary your support for your students. So like I said, this is one for Park Asterix. This will be in the webinar pack from that we'll send out from this evening. Different questions. There are no answers to go with it, purely because the website can be updated daily. Different prices, different rides and things are closed and open. So there's no kind of answer sheet that goes with it, but it's very recently done. I did it last week, so you should be able to just give that to your students. One thing you can do as well is you can have students create their own questions. So you could give them a few questions, for example, and then get them to write their own. Then for the next lesson, they can swap with their partner. So it's another way of extending the students as well. We've got the same Webquest. This one is for the theme park in Madrid, so it's very similar. And then the next slide, this one, if anybody is interested in using authentic materials or they want to do a Webquest, this Discover Madrid website, and again, we'll put the website in the pack as well, is absolutely fantastic. It's got so much information on Madrid, really clearly organised in that Donde Ir tab. It pops out with different culture, food, sports, all sorts of different things. So it's fantastic for doing a Webquest if you wanted to. But they also have a lot of downloadable materials. So maps of the city, all the brochures from the museums, different downloadable materials on food. So if you're looking for authentic materials or a Webquest based on Spanish for Madrid, that's an absolutely fantastic one that you could use. Another suggestion for a Webquest would be to look at online shopping. So in the olden days, us teachers would go abroad in the summer holidays and come back absolutely laden with brochures from the supermarkets that you could pick up. But now we can just do it online. You don't need to get the students to sign up. The only thing they need to do is just to put in a postcode, a Spanish postcode for Mercadona, for example. Nothing else, no signing up, no details, no buying anything, but they just need a postcode. So I use the postcode of the Reina Sofia Museum just to access that, and then they can search the website for any of the products. You can give students a shopping list, just ask them to find these things. You can give them a list of products in Spanish and ask them to find out what they are. Obviously, you know, a bit more complicated or things that you haven't come across already in lessons. You can give students a recipe, either in English or the target language, get them to work out what the total cost of making it would be. So again, they're using their numeracy skills there. Ask students to meal plan for the week. That's a really good one, particularly if you have done the topic of food. They can meal plan for the whole week for a certain amount of people, work out how much it would cost, or you can give them a budget to work on as well. And For some students, particularly those students who want to challenge a bit more, ask them to plan a party for 5 friends, but then give them some complications. So they have to think about one friend's bringing their cat or their baby, one friend's going to be vegan, one friend's allergic to seafood. So they have to plan meals for the party for absolutely everyone and work out the cost. So that's a really, really engaging activity. It works really, really well. It works with the actual print copies, but it will work just as well as a Webquest as well. The next one, still looking at authentic materials. Menus, obviously fantastic. Again, if you've done the topic of food, that's one that students do find quite engaging because obviously it relates to their personal experience. So there's lots of menus that you can use. The French ones there came from the Parc Astérix website. All of the menus from all of the restaurants from the park are on the website. And there's a Spanish one there as well. So you can, again, get students to answer questions about it. You can get students to produce their own menu. If you want to, you can print these out. You can print out a selection. You maybe would just need just a few, because students could work in groups. You could laminate them and then use them for future years, so you're not recreating work for yourself next year. Elaine also mentioned to me earlier on that something like that would be good for practicing read aloud as well. You've got authentic Spanish there. Students could be using that in preparation for a read aloud practice in preparation for the new spec GCSE as well. Again, authentic materials. This is from that Discover Madrid website, so they've got so much information about the different sites, the different museums and everything. I've downloaded these, which is just a kind of intro about the 3 kind of main museums or the main art galleries in Madrid. And there's some questions there. Again, if you printed them off, you could maybe print off 2 copies, have them put on different tables and get students to work in a carousel around the room. They really, really like those authentic materials, saying this is designed for Spanish people who speak Spanish, and you're able to access it. That gives them a real confidence boost. And then a few other quick ideas. Again, these were just ideas I used with that really tricky Year 9 class on a Friday afternoon. Other things you could do, problem solving. So again, in the same way they like digging around for information, finding the answers from a Webquest. Some students find it really engaging to do problem solving activities because they're using another skill alongside their languages. So this one is an example of, it's called the Einstein puzzle. But this one's, you've got a French and a Spanish one there. I'm sure Elaine will help me translate to German if anybody wants a German one as well. Students just need to work out whose house is whose house is whose. But again, that's something that kind of it takes the pressure off learning the language. They're not so focused on the French because they're focused on those skills, even though they're using the language as well. And then the next one, obviously perhaps think about other subjects that students are interested in. So, you know, if you can find a way in just to keep those students engaged till the end of term, that can be really good. One thing pretty much all of your students are going to be doing is a science, at least one science. So see if there's any way that you can bring science into the MFL classroom. You can ask support from your science colleagues as well, but there's lots of ways that overlap. So this is the first one. You can see a periodic table kind of quiz there. So students have to find the symbols for each of those elements that I've listed in the column on the left. Write all the symbols. It will make a Spanish word, and then they need to translate that into English, and they can have their own. They can have a go at making their own as well. They could then take some of their choose an element, choose a couple of elements, make a little poster about those, research what that element's used for, create a poster in the target language. You can see a couple of examples there that would be nice for your display for the following year. And also, again, there's lots and lots of authentic materials. Students can use their real world knowledge to access that material. This one, 10 benefits to vitamin C, they will already have some information about it from their science lessons, and they can kind of use that to make sense of the language there as well. So lots of authentic materials available for STEM subjects. And the final idea, this one is really, really nice. I've done this with Year 7 all the way up to Year 9, and it works really well. So they are callograms, so they are a picture that is formed up of words that relate to that subjects. So that first one is a kind of description about Paris, drawn in the shape of an Eiffel Tower. It could be done a paragraph or a sentence level. So again, if you're pushing some of your students who are continuing to GCSE, you could get them to write a paragraph on their holidays in the form of the Eiffel Tower, or the form of a beach, however they want to do it. But it can also be done at single word level as well. So if you've got a revision activity, you've got end of term tests, or you want to review vocab on the topic of food, for example, students could write out all the vocab they know on the topic of food in the shape of a plate with a knife and fork, or in the shape of an ice cream, however they want to do it. You can suggest examples to students. So I've given kind of 4 examples there, but again, you could let students choose their own interests. That's a nice piece of work for them to produce that they can either take home, or again, thinking about blank spaces on the wall for next year, they look really, really nice as displays. If you cut sort of, even if it's maybe half A5 or an A5 sheet, coloured paper or coloured card, students do that on there. They look really, really nice as a display for your classroom. I think that is everything that I was going to say. But yeah, I'll hand back to Elaine and Brian, just in case there are any questions at the end.
Great, thank you, Emma. Thanks for that session. It's really great ideas, and we had good fun putting this one together. And I know we planned it a couple of weeks ago, and we've run through it a few times. So you can see our final slide there is, if you want to get a trial for Language Nut, there's a 30-day free trial, and obviously that might be extended into the summer for those of you that want to try it. There's our website, languagenut.com. Myself and Emma and Brian's emails are there. If you want anything extra tonight, please let us know. Just draw your attention to Emma. It's Emma B. We've had a few people contacting us and say Emma doesn't work for us anymore. Well, actually she does. She very much does. Because we put Emma B because we did have another colleague that used to work for us that was called Emma. So just be mindful if you are typing in Emma's email. And again, the QR code is there if you haven't had a chance to do it, or you would like to do it. Obviously, if there's something you don't feel you want to be participating, that's fine, but it is useful for us to see. And again, just to highlight, it is anonymous. Okay. So, Brian, you're operating the scenes behind the scenes today. Is there any questions that have come up, or anything that anybody wants to suggest or tell us or comment on?
No, we've no questions at the moment.
Great.
I'm just going to whiz through just to let everybody know what some of the responses we've had so far, just to give some ideas of what's going on. Languages taught in schools, we've got French and Spanish as the majority, which is, what we'd anticipate. Yeah. One person has put other. I'm quite intrigued as to what that might be. So if that was you, please just pop in the chat what other language you're teaching in your school. It's just always good for us to know. When do your students make choices? All of our respondents so far, their students make their option choices in year 9.
Yeah.
So they're obviously doing the 2-year GCSE course. And percentage of current year 11 cohorts taking a language, that's interesting. The majority are at 40%, which is very reasonable. We've got 50% and a couple of schools at 80%, which is excellent. And what percentage of your current year 8 9 cohorts will be obviously year 9 cohort just opted to take a language? So yeah, again, a little bit of an improvement actually, a little bit more, same numbers at 80%, but more at 50%. So we're starting to see a trend there, which is improving, which is nice to hear.
Yeah.
And in terms of the current scenario with year 8 and 9, the vast majority have mixed classes, some who have opted and some who haven't, and a class where some students have been forced to opt for a language as well. And it's interesting because that leads nicely into the biggest challenges, and actually the top kind of response is all to do with maintaining motivation.
Yeah.
And one of those particularly said, some students are forced to take a language, which obviously links in with motivation. So let's hope that everything that we've talked about, you and Elaine and Emma have talked about today, is going to give you some ideas that help, with that group, and moving into Key Stage 4 as well. As the new year starts with year 10.
Yeah, it's never an easy option. I remember when I was doing my senior director role, we had schools where students were, there'd be 4 or 5 students in a class where you had maybe 20 kids who had opted and 4 or 5 were holding you back teaching. And that is a difficult scenario. again, if you want any help or support with that, please reach out to us. We're more than happy to give you our experience of that. Particularly if you're using Language Nut, more than happy to do some work with you in the classroom to help you with that as part of your kind of our collaboration with you. It's not an easy thing to have to deal with that, and my heart goes out to people like that. But again, if you look at our website, there's so much stuff out in language community across everybody's websites. You can find loads of things, and you can take the most boring resource, go in there, and if you do it in a way that you just engages the children, you can really feel like you get something out of that lesson. If you've got that kind of like toolkit of, hate to use the word pedagogy because people don't use that these days, but it's just the strategies of how to deal with it, of how to deal with a resource and how to make it get the most out of one resource so that you're not having to constantly have loads and loads of PowerPoint slides and loads of resources, because that's going to tire you out. You're already shattered as it is without having to do that as well. So yeah, but please feel free to look on our website. There's lots of webinars there that are free, again, to watch. Lots of them deal with motivation, creativity. There's one that deals with behaviour, and which is what I did earlier in the year, and lots of different things there. So if that's we can wrap up there, Brian. I guess there's no more questions.
I think we can. The only thing I'm going to do a little plug for Language Nut for Trusts right at the end there, because those of you who are Language Nut subscribers know that we run competitions at least once, if not twice a year. We did 2 over the last academic year for all of our Language Nut subscribers. So that means all students basically are pipped against each other, and the top 50 win a prize internationally, which is really exciting. And I know we've had a lot of winners across the UK, and in particular, the last one that we did. But we also run competitions for trusts as well. We've been running them for a few trusts this term. So if your school is part of a trust, and obviously if all the schools subscribe in the trust, the chances are there will be a competition. We'll have that organised already. But if you're 1 or 2 schools in the trust and there's others that don't subscribe yet, come and talk to us. We can basically organise a trial for the others at the same time as doing a competition, and it's a great way to get all your students motivated.
Yeah, certainly when I first started, came across Language Nut 5 years ago, that's what I did. I organised a competition with the school. So if you've got somebody in your trust, if you are in a trust, or if you're in an LEA, even somebody that there's kind of like comes in and works with you in languages, or is a known person for your LEA, then email them, contact them, and just say, is it possible to get a trial going, and we can get a possibility to get a competition going, and that does really help with motivation. In addition to giving your students a certificate, and just some students will go, I'm not bothered about a certificate, I don't care about that. You're never going to win every child, but you're going to get the majority, when hopefully they will kind of carry the ones that are reluctant forward. You can only try. So thank you very much for attending tonight's session, and I hope you find some useful resources, and from the Language Nut team, we'd like to wish you a nice evening, and hopefully a nice summer holidays ahead of you. Thank you.
Thank you.